Research suggests that part of the problem is that most people assume that someone would never confess to a crime they didn't commit, partly because people don't really understand the dispositional and situational factors that lead to false confessions. So who would falsely confess and why would they do it? Well, some people are more vulnerable to false confessions than others due to individual difference characteristics that these people have. For example, some people are generally more prone to compliance and suggestibility than others. Other people are highly anxious, fearful, depressed, delusional, or otherwise psychologically disordered, and this makes them vulnerable. And for some, their age, specifically being young, makes them vulnerable too. Goodjohnson in 2003 presented an interactive model of the process through which false confessions occur, in which the vulnerability factors, such as the one I've just talked about, were actually involved. The other contributing factors to this dynamic and social process outlined by Goodjohnson were contextual factors. These are the nature and seriousness of the crime being investigated, the strength of the police evidence, and the pressure on the police to solve the crime. And also custodial factors, such as the length and nature of the detention and interrogation. But Goodjohnson also noticed some support or protective factors that actually help guard against false confessions. And these include the presence of a lawyer or independent person for vulnerable suspects while the interview or interrogation is taking place. Now, it's fair to say that these factors can combine to sometimes result in false confessions to crime. Cassin and Reitzman in 1985 differentiated between 3 different psychological types of false confessions that occur as a function of different sources of pressure. The first are voluntary false confessions, which are confessions given without any pressure. Here the pressure, or the motivation if you like, to make a false confession is internal to the person themselves and reflect a vulnerability inherent in that person. Case examples of these types of confessions provided by Goodjohnson in 2003 show a strong association with psychopathology. These types of false confessions may occur, for example, because an individual has simply confused what is fact and what is fantasy. The second type of false confessions are coerced compliant false confessions. These are confessions made due to custodial pressures. So, for example, people make these types of confessions to escape or avoid an aversive interrogation, or to gain some kind of promised reward. Consistent with the general tendency for immediate or proximal factors to influence behaviour more strongly than delayed or distal factors, a person comes to see the short-term benefits of confessing as outweighing those long-term costs of being prosecuted and potentially incarcerated for the crime. Recent experimental research by Madeline and colleagues in 2013 showed that this tendency to overweigh short-term contingencies in interrogation contexts was stronger in a lengthy interview than a shorter one, or amongst those who simply expected a longer interview versus a shorter one, and was also more present in interrogations about less serious crimes and unethical behaviours than in interviews about more serious crimes and unethical behaviours. However, with this type of false confession, fundamentally the person knows that they have not committed the crime. They simply confess to doing the crime to escape the aversive situation. The final type of false confession is the coerced internalized false confession, where the innocent person comes to believe that they have committed the crime as a result of the interview or interrogation. In this case, the person's memory for the event may be changed permanently, or they may be led to believe that they have blocked out the memory of committing the crime.